I've been excited about this all morning. So I've been sitting at my desk thinking how I wanted to do all of this. And so I want you to know that I want it to be fun, but I want you to really know that they are very complicated. And I am going to tell you some things about the new FHA guidelines that is affecting a lot of these associations. And we're going to kind of go through that. I also would like to, like Jody said, we can take questions as we go along, because sometimes that tells me what I need to go through and let you know. So one of the things that I always like to do in a class, some of you have taken my class before, some of you have not. There's always new stuff. And I want to let you know that in the state of California, there are 55,000 homeowner associations. 80% of all new construction is going to be condominiums, because these cities are loving the idea, because they can go up, and because there's no more spread out land, they can go up to a low rise, which is 8 stories, and they can get a lot more taxes, but they bring more businesses to their little downtown areas. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on around the planning of where we're going with these homeowner associations. When I started, I bought my first condominium back in 1963. My daughter was 5. I was going to school. I bought my first condominium. I paid $12,500 for it. It just sold for $900,000, not mine. I didn't keep it. My mother was in real estate, and she always said, diamonds are not a girl's best friend, no matter what you're told. It's property. And that is really true. So as real estate agents, that's our job, is to find people and match them up with the perfect place. You're going to have the first-time home buyers, you're going to have the downsizers, you're going to have the investment companies, all investment people. All of these fit into the category of looking at and thinking about a condominium. So I kind of want to go back to the very beginning. I did bring the magic 8 ball because it gives me answers that are harder to get, you know. So one of the first things that happens is you go out and you list a piece of property. And when you list that piece of property, you now take and go set it up at an escrow company, and you ask that escrow officer, by the way, this is a favor that they do for you. It is not really part of the escrow process, but it has become that over the years. But they will go back to the association, and however the documents are available, sometimes it's on Condo Search, sometimes on HomeWise, sometimes you get them directly from the association or a company like one of our divisions that we have. So interestingly enough, the documents aren't just the documents. The basics are the CC&Rs, the bylaws, and the articles of incorporation. But why is an association in place? It's to maintain, preserve, and enhance the property and its value. So sometimes you have to go in, and I know when you go inside, you go in and you stage the property and you make it look like a great, beautiful model. But the exterior might not look quite the same. And so that's one of the things that you're looking at when you're selling, because that's going to be the first vision that they get. And the next vision is going to be the inside, which you spent a lot of time doing your staging and that type of thing. So the biggest thing that I look at is the title companies when they're ordering the docs. If it's a self-managed homeowner association, they can only charge for the document copies, and they have to send those to you. Most of the smaller projects do not understand the concept, so you're not going to get a full set of package there as a general rule. Then you have the ones that are managed by a management company, and what the law says is that they can charge for an outside service whatever the market will bear. So you're seeing the documents between $200 and I think the highest one I've seen is $900. So you pay that money. Can you rely on those documents to be fully complete and being able to be understood? Let me ask. Probably not. So the 8 ball, and I say probably not. You cannot rely on those documents that they've done the job for your seller that is responsible for all of these documents. They want to move on. They're asking you to do it. You get the documents. You have that in the package. And generally, I'm seeing a lot of them come through in the OI files, and you run them all together with your contracts. You have all your contracts in your termite inspection and your roof inspection, everything is there. And on the bottom, they're all mixed and matched. You have the HOA documents. It is extremely convoluted. And one of the things we say is, okay, you've got 3 days. You have to go away, read these, understand them, and you're going to sign off on them. These people don't have a clue. They're like deer in the headlights. They really don't understand what they're looking at or what am I looking for. So I've got the CC&Rs, I've got the bylaws. What does that mean? What's this budget? What does that mean? And they're asking you to help them sort through all of this stuff. And as real estate agents, most of you, a few of you will look at the documents, but most of you just pass them on because in your agreement in the contract, it says that you are not supposed to evaluate and speak about the HOA documents. Yet it is one of the most important documents of all of your transaction. So the reason it is that budget, if you look at nothing other than the budget and the minutes, you will get a little bit of history about that. Most of the time it says how many units are there. That's pretty easy to dig up, and that's one of the things you put on your flyer on realestate.com to list the property. So once you've done that, that is not all you need to know. You need to know the financial health, because not only are you selling a home, but you're selling a multi-million-dollar corporation. In the early days, they had thought that they would be made into licensing specific for the sale of condominiums. That didn't fly, as we know, but it also has created some problems for the agents as well as for the buyers, because the financial health of the association is one of the most important parts of those documents. And I'm going to come back to that. So I want to let you know that part of my title today was Hidden Secrets. I like to tell you the secrets that I know so that you can use them in reviewing these documents. And we're going to go through financial more in detail and reserve studies, that type of thing. In the 55,000 associations, less than 5% of them are financially healthy. And that's pretty scary, because most people are saying, I don't want to contribute money for when the roof gets done. They forgot that they're not contributing for the new roof. They're contributing for the use of the roof they have now. And as that goes down, then they will have the money when it comes time, supposedly, on the back end. Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen in the Florida building that went crashing down. They had told the reserve study company, the fellow who did the reviews for them for like probably 10, 15 years. And he said every year he told them the same thing. You've got to raise your dues and have a special assessment. So we're going to come back to all of that, because the financial is one of my funnest parts of this whole presentation. So now you've got your preliminary title report. Let's go back to the beginning. You've got your documents coming in the mail or some email. So you've got your preliminary title report. People tell me all the time, I'm selling a townhouse. And then my next question is it a condominium or is it a planned development? And they go, what? And I say, is it a condominium or a planned development? And they said, it's a townhouse. I said, well, a townhouse is a style. It's an up and down. 2 floors generally, sometimes 3, but it is a townhouse, meaning it's got others right next to it, and it just goes up 2 stories or 3 stories. So that is considered a townhouse, but a townhouse can be a condo or a planned development. How do you know what it is? If you go to the hidden secret in your, in your preliminary title report, you're going to see that it says the word lot or unit in front of the description of the property. So this is one of the things that I think agents should always look at, because when you're listing them, you got to list them in the right format of the owner occupancy of what they're buying. So in a planned unit development, They own the land underneath the building and the interior of the unit. The association is formed to do maintenance of the exterior and take care of the roof so that people aren't fighting over which roofer to use or what materials they need to use or whatever. So that's a planned development. In a condominium, you only own airspace. Generally speaking, it's easy to tell a condominium because they're going to be stacked on top of each other. And otherwise, all what is owned by the person who buys a condominium are the walls in, the floors up, and the ceiling down. Everything within that unit. The plumbing in the kitchen, the plumbing in the bathroom. If your shower head gets broken, that's fine. It's inside, you just change it out. If a pipe breaks behind the wall in a condominium, the association owns that pipe and is responsible to maintain it. And the thing I get the most is, oh my gosh, my wall is torn out, but they won't put it back. What do I do? And that, I'm here to tell you that in a condominium, that wall is yours to replace. So you're going to want them to come in, fix the leak behind the wall. They're going to tear everything out. And then you've got to get your own contractor to come in and replace that drywall and the tile and whatever else was in there. So that's a big thing that comes up a lot in these units where the leaks on the inside of the unit, the wall, the plasterboard, or whatever the covering is, it's yours. Anything behind the wall is an association issue. That's on a condominium. In a planned unit development, it could be your responsibility for both. You have to look at the governing documents because those will tell you what the association is responsible to maintain versus what you're supposed to maintain. There's a big difference in some of these. I have two housing tracts right next to each other. And one is considered a condominium and one is considered a planned development. Identical floor plans, identical structures, just on different lots, and they've got different names. So you can't rely on the fact that that's a condominium. If it's stacked, it's always a condominium. If it's a planned unit development, it could be a townhouse, it could be a single family house, 1 story with little 0 lot lines. So there's new stuff coming up all the time around the description of these properties, which is the hardest part for you before you go and put them on the market. So any questions up to this point?
Does anybody have any questions yet for Jackie? You can go ahead and raise your hand and we can ask. All right, Jen?
Yeah, I was just wondering on with the plan unit development, because they own the land, are they ever able to change that? You know, like, let's say it was a single family home in an HOA. Do they put stuff in the documents that says that they can't augment this property, or is it possible that you can do so? The way that you cannot change a condo.
Yeah, if it's a condo, no.
Right.
Because it's an airspace ownership. If it's a planned unit development and the building burns down to the ground, you've got to rebuild it. Depending on the CCNRs, you're going to have to build it based on that same floor plan, that same style. The inside could be changed out a little bit, but the exterior has to look the same because they're all very consistent in structure. And that's why
there's something that would be in the documents that would say, if this, you have to build the same thing. You couldn't, like 50 years down the line, it burns.
If the whole building goes down like the one in Florida, they can pretty much choose because they've lost their homes and that becomes a different issue. There generally is a section in the CCNRs at the back about destruction of a building and how it has to be rebuilt. But once it's in an association, you'd have to have 100% of the people say that they don't want the association anymore, and then they would disband it. Any funds in the reserves would go back to the owners. So it depends on what happens to it. If more than 50% of them are going to be hard to rebuild, there's no insurance, people start losing them. There are some guidelines in the CCNRs that will tell them what they can do about that and the property.
Interesting. Thank you.
Laborio.
I just have a quick question of a unit I recently showed. It was like a condo style. It was on the 3rd level, but it had a garage on the ground level and it was considered a PUD. Is that a new thing that's coming up?
What kind of a garage was it? Was it several garages underneath the building?
Yeah, several individual garages. But it didn't have direct access to the unit. The unit was on the 3rd and 4th floor, the 3rd
Right.
floor condo style.
Generally speaking, I've seen that structure of that style before. They'll put all the garages on the bottom and then they assign the garage one of two ways. Generally, it is deeded to the property. So if it would say 201, and that would be the first one, the second one. But it starts with the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor, and those could be grant deeded or rented to those units. A lot of times they think, oh, let's rent these things. Gets to be a little bit hectic. But you look at the preliminary title report and look at the property description and see how that garage is assigned to the property. But you can have them all along the bottom, doesn't have to be directly connected to a unit. It's just an assignment that is grant deeded to that particular property.
So in this case, do you own the garage space per se, and then the airspace as well of where the unit is?
Well, okay, so they build the garages first. Sometimes they're all open underneath the building. Some, I've seen just a few of those where you're saying that they had individual garages, but those are just, they're built that way. Then they build the 2 stories above that. And then they assign each one of those garages to a specific unit. So you could be down on the far left and be in the middle of the 2nd story. Doesn't make any difference where your unit is. It's just grant deeded a space to you, and you'd have to know, and it will tell you in the CC&Rs exactly what happened in your preliminary title report. Also, look at your preliminary title report first about garage and storage space, how it's been assigned. That's an interesting question. I've only seen like 2 of them like that, and it's been a long time. But they're coming up with all kinds of new, instead of just having open underground parking, they're doing that individual. Sometimes they're not even by the building, they're set aside on another strip of land right behind the building, and they still do exactly the same thing. They just assign those or grant deed them out. So look at your preliminary title report first and see if it is actually grant deeded or assigned.
Okay, is it Shafak?
Yeah, Shafak. So you mentioned that in a planned unit development, you own the land and the interior, but the CC&Rs dictate what can actually be done on that land. So is there any advantage of actually having a PUD and owning the land, or any benefit to that? Or is it, on a day-to-day, isn't it effectively the same as a condo?
Well, yes and no. When you own land, then the value it's higher. In a condominium, you own airspace, and airspace doesn't cost as much as the one that has a facility attached to it. Either side, you've got to look at the governing documents to find out who's responsible for what. So PUDs are more attractive because you do own the land and the value is generally higher. The appreciation value is generally higher than it is in a condominium. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we're gonna keep going.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Any of these we can come back to, so just write them down and we'll come back to them. There is a website that I usually share, which is another one of my little tools that I use. It's called davis-sterling.com. There are some amazing little 2 to 3 minute videos in there that I think are well worth your time and energy to go through. There's one in there about budgeting, or the board of directors, what are their duties, different ones like that. So if you've got a first-time home buyer and you don't have all the answers about what they're looking at and what they're buying, you can send them to that website, and I'll give that address to Jody so she can put it in the system for you.
All right, it's already there.
Ah, good.
I knew
Okay.
you were gonna ask for it.
It's one of my funnest websites. The fellow that is two of the attorneys, one is Auden, and the other one is Larry Sterling. And just interestingly enough, Larry used to be in the state legislative branch. And so when a friend of his said, I have so much problem with my homeowner association, he was tasked to get the civil codes all put together and make them so that there's business codes, civil codes, and consumer affairs codes. And those were all pulled together, and that's what became the Davis-Sterling Act over the years. Well, he's a business partner in the attorney into the Davis-Sterling, and the website is one of their different things that they have as tools for people to use. And I use that probably 10, 15 times a day. Usually, if I've got a new buyer that I'm working with, I take them there and they're telling me what they're looking for, and I show them which little 3-minute video they can get all the information that they want. So it's supporting backup information to help you get your clients more educated, and great for you to look at them also to be educated about what is out there and available to you as learning tools and teaching tools. Always love those kinds of things. So moving on to the next part of what we're doing, you just got all those documents. If you put it in IO as just a file folder and you're asking someone to go away to understand, read, and sign off on those documents in 3 working days, you're asking a lot that maybe you can't even do. So you have to take a look at what's realistic. And I recommend that they be in separate file folders so you can just hit a button and go right to you can have them in IO, but just have it in one file folder so they're not looking at all the contractual things. Although I enjoy those contractual things, one of the things I look at when I see and get those IO files is I'm looking at the termite report. You know, this is probably one of the biggest areas of consideration when you're selling in these buildings that are getting a little bit older. Northern California was famous for all of those beautiful orchards, and a lot of the land and the way that they built on top of some of that stuff effectively brought termites into the building. So termites eat 24/7. They don't care if it's a condominium or a planned unit development. They don't care if it's a high rise or a low rise or a 1-story. They just keep eating. And a lot of times, if it's a condominium, you go, I don't have to worry about that. The association's responsible. Well, I had an agent that I worked with for many years, and his sister was buying into a homeowner association. He says, I can do this report. So he sat down and he did it, and he remembered about termites. And I said, get a letter from the association, if nothing else, that they're responsible for the termites. What he forgot that I said is you make sure that they have the money to do it. So his sister moves into the property. She's got one that's in Los Altos, and it had 3 sides of the building were up on stilts with a patio. And it was yellow tagged just before they closed escrow. And so his sister goes to the next board meeting and says to the board, so when can I schedule this to be done? I'm going to have my big open house and you're more than welcome to come, but I need the deck redone so we can go out on the deck. And they said, honey, we said we were responsible, not that we had any money. So that's a learning lesson. He said that there are other things that we should be looking at, along with the fact that the association is, in fact, responsible. So we look at the budgets. The budgets are the biggest thing that you're going to go directly for, but there's other parts of those documents that are equally as important. Certainly the CC&Rs. CC&Rs, also called declarations, the older ones are. If they're more than 10 years old, they're very difficult to enforce, because not only do you have to go to that document, but now you've got to go into that website I told you and go to that particular section and find out whether it's higher or lower. If the CC&Rs or more stringent, that's the higher. Or if it's not as stringent, whichever is the most, they have to do the most is going to be the one that will prevail. And the Davis-Sterling Act, now that it is a standalone set of documents, is anything that gets changed just gets changed at the Davis-Sterling level. This is a big deal because associations think you can go on and on and on. I looked at a set yesterday that were from 1963. They'd never changed them, and the declarant was still the main person. That was the developer, and that no longer existed. So it was, they just said, oh, we don't look at that part. But there's so many laws like the election rules or the rental restrictions. Rental restrictions in 2021 became a big deal. And if you go to the CC&Rs and you're looking for their rental restrictions, and it says that you aren't able to rent, then they're not correct. You have to go to the Davis-Sterling. The new law says that the association has to have a minimum of 25%, not lower, but minimum of 25% available spots for people to rent their properties. Now, if you don't get a cap on it, and you're looking at a 49% owner occupied property, that means 51% of them are rented, and you're going to have a problem with the lenders because the lenders, they're saying they're condominium ownership, home ownership to live in, not investment properties or rentals. So sometimes they will just cancel that out right away. Now that we're at FHA, I want to tell you what the new guideline is that they're really scrutinizing these homeowner associations and whether they have enough reserves to cover the costs without doing special assessments. I'm not going to go through that right now because I'm going to spend some time with that since it's become such a big deal. And so I want to, the rental cap should be at least 49%. 30 is better, or even 35% can be rented, you're okay. The minute you get higher than that, depending on the amount of down payment, it could make a big difference whether that person is going to be approved along with that project, because they are having to approve the project as well as the buyer. So that's a big deal. And rentals are becoming more of an issue. Airbnb and I would say about 85 to 90% of them are forbidden because they don't know who's coming in and out, and they felt that that was just too much. So you'll see the CC&Rs that will say no Airbnb, or the older documents might have a cap on it. Sometimes the owners would say, oh, well, we're going to only have 10% renters. That's no longer allowable. They have to allow them to have rent for 30 days or more, but not under 30 days. So 30 days or more, and generally that is to effectively keep the numbers down. So any questions on rentals? I usually get a lot of them on rentals, and because people still don't understand that concept yet.
Anybody have any questions on rentals and HOAs for Jackie?
Great.
Oh, okay.
That's perfect. I love it. Moving right along. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on rentals. We'll go more into down payments and new buildings that you're trying to sell someone in. The other thing that seems to come up a lot is whether there's litigation or not. FHA now will say, if it says litigation, they don't loan on litigated properties. Now they're also going to say that if it says arbitration or mediation, they're not going to loan on those properties either, because they have a stigma or a blockage there that could affect the long-term ownership of that property. So they don't like to get too far out there. How much time do we have? Oh, good, we're good. I get off on some of these tangents, but one of the things in your CC&Rs that you should be looking at, especially if some of the newer ones, if they're older ones, you get the use restrictions. The two areas that I say real estate agents, along with your budget and your financial information, you should be looking at the use restrictions and the architectural guidelines. Architectural guidelines tell you everything you can and can't do to the interior. Example, I have a homeowner association right now that has a new owner that wants to take a part of the master closet and make the bathroom bigger. And that is doable as long as they're not putting piping in, because they can't connect, they have to connect to the association's piping behind the wall, whether it's a planned development or a condominium. And that's generally a problem if they're going to add something like a sink or a shower or something of that nature. So those are things that you need to be aware of. The architectural control requires that the board of directors and or their committee be given your plans and be able to go through those plans and understand what you're trying to do, and then they'll give you approval or denial. You still have to get through the city building permits. Anything you do to that building, such as I had one the other day that wanted to put a skylight in, and they were going to have to go through the roof, which was the association's responsibility. The association allowed them to do it, but they filed a notice on the property that stays with the property now forever that says that if that skylight leaks or causes any damage to the building, you're responsible as an individual homeowner. So they've given you permission, but they've also given you the liability for maintenance. So that's we're seeing a lot more of, because people like to modernize things a little bit more and have more light. Sometimes they want to change out windows. We're seeing that condominiums are picking and choosing some of the components that they want to transfer back to the owners to maintain. That's a pretty scary thing, because one that had done it a couple of years ago, all of a sudden now their roofs need to be done and nobody can agree as to the roofer, the type, or whatever it is that they want to do. So there's no structure there. So that boards are asked to steer away from making those kinds of decisions without having a backup plan about how to do it. Let's see, the other thing I get a lot is if there's litigation and it wins money, will I get the money so I can fix up my unit? The answer to that is no, that the corporation is the one suing. So the money and funds go back to the corporation. They will have to fix whatever the maintenance items are. And if any money is left over, they would put it into the reserves to help to bring those to a better condition. What is a good condition or percentage of funding in the reserves? Lenders would like to see at least 70%. Many associations are down in the 2s, the 3s, 19, 20. I get those every day. And what that means is they have not been contributing for many years the amount of money to the reserves. They've been spending more on the operating, or they haven't been raising their dues. A board of directors can raise the dues by 20% a year without a vote of the membership. That's a pretty sizable number when you get up into the, $800 a month, because it had to go up. They can raise the dues to help to fund those reserves, but sooner or later, they're going to have to do a special assessment to cover the costs. So when a buyer is going in there, CAR got a bill passed several years ago that said, we don't want to know on the cash flow basis, which up until about 15 years ago was the case. The associations would put on their cover letter, we're so proud we're 100% funded, but they forgot the words this year. By not putting the words this year and being on the cash flow, 2 years later, they would have a big special assessment and go, wait a minute, the cover letter says we're 100% funded. Oh yeah, we forgot the words this year. So now they have to do it on the accrual basis. The accrual basis of calculation is if you have a roof, you calculate what the cost is today. And then where you are today is the value, the difference between where you should be and what you do have is the difference, and that's the percentage funded. You have to do that on every single component. This is another one of my hidden secrets. Many associations will do a special assessment and they'll get a bank loan. And they're supposed to tell you that there's a bank loan. At the time of sale, Carr got that bill passed along with a partial of it that said, we want to know what the financial health is because any deficits in the reserve are negotiable between the buyer and the seller. The market we came out of a year ago when we had all the 100,000 over list price or whatever type offers, there was no negotiation room at all. We are seeing that subside a little bit, and we are seeing some that are negotiable, but the deficit, you're asking the buyer to pick up the usage that you've had on the property all of the years that you've owned it, and you're asking them to pick up that tab to pay for it. Oh, but they're going to get the value of the new roof. Yes, but you've had the value of the roof now. And that's what they're looking at. So it's a thought process on how you distinguish that. You want to know what that percentage is, but you want the dollar amount more than the percentage. And a quick math on that is you have to have a current balance sheet, a year-end report from the CPA if there's a $75,000 or more in income, because you need to know what the balance is today to subtract it from what should be in there today, and then divide it by the number of units, and it'll tell you what that percentage is. I can give you that calculation. So if you're looking at properties and you want to know how to do that, you can give me a call and I can let you know again about the little math. But that is a very big secret. I'm seeing some of them where the board says, oh, our governing documents allow us to get a bank loan without a vote of the membership. Special assessments and bank loans in the older documents requires the membership's vote. The membership doesn't vote, you don't get the special assessment, and the work doesn't get done. So in the newer ones, they're putting in that the board has the right to get a bank loan. Now, this bank loan, what they do with it is they tell you 1 year that they have a bank loan, but then it just kind of falls by the wayside, might change management or whatever, and you don't have any idea that there's a bank loan, but it's inside of the reserves, inside the reserves. You'll see a line item, repayment of that special assessment, because a bank loan is a special assessment no matter what color you paint it, no matter how many times you cut it or dice it, it is borrowing money, and it is a definite special assessment. So you've got to be careful. I'm seeing that more and more and more. And then somebody gets in there and they have that in the money and they're showing that they're 81% funded, but in truth, they're paying back that bank loan over a period of years. Again, that is a negotiable point. If you know about it, it should be part upfront in every single set of minutes, in the budgets for every year, and also in the CPA year-end review. Any questions on financials? Because that sometimes gets to be the most convoluted.
I was just gonna say, a lot of times people have questions about the financials and things like that. Does anybody have any? Jen?
Are reserve studies required, and how often are they required if they are?
Good question. Reserve studies are a tool that the association uses to fund their budgets, to do their budgets. They are required. They're required to be done with a physical inspection every 3 years and updated yearly with any work they did the previous year. New mandate, flash. They will now be required. There's a new, it'll be a new term, a whole new format of these reserve studies because the government wants them to be inspected. The balcony issue is one of them. Condominiums, if you had a balcony that protruded off or stairways that went up that were wood and they were deteriorating, you had to do destructive testing. Most of the associations are getting better to get their engineering companies, because you have to have a licensed engineer to go in there to do the destructive testing. And just using the balconies as a little moderate, we knew that was gonna come down the pike about them including it in all reserves, because we could see it when they came out with the balcony issue. If you can have two buildings and one could be a condo and then the other is the planned development. In a condominium, the association has to do those inspections. As a real estate agent in a condominium, I mean, a townhouse, if it's got a protruded balcony, you better be thinking about getting an engineering report on that, because the owners are responsible at that point. So condominiums, they are responsible for that whole destructive testing thing, and that became a special assessment. They have until January 1st, 2025. So all of the remainder of this year and all of 2024. But on December 25th, they will start, if they didn't do their destructive testing report, then they will start being fined, and it can be $1,000 a month. That's just talk and hearsay right now, but they will be penalized for having not done their inspections. All of this came about because of what happened in Florida with that building going down, because they didn't want to do destructive testing. They didn't want to do reserve studies. So right now, you've only got the reserve study that says you have to do it to know about the facilities. Within the next year or so, you're going to start seeing more structural investigative work that has to be done in order to make that up. So every 3 years, physical inspection, every year updates. If you did half of the roofs, those roofs get updated and a new base gets put in there. Anything else? Does that answer the question?
Yes, very much so. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
I'm gonna ask a question that I don't know if this is on finances, but this is on insurance. This is something that came up in the CBVA marketing meeting this morning. There's a property in Palo Alto, and I can't remember buyer or seller. But somebody was looking to get a loan to purchase the house. And part of the insurance requirements was that the HOA had to carry I think 2.5 million in flood insurance. And the HOA had $1 million in flood insurance. And so they went to the HOA and said, will you up the insurance requirement to 2.5? And the HOA said no. And the deal fell through. But it sounds like more lenders are requiring higher limits on for HOAs and just insurance in general. Have you encountered anything like that or seen anything?
One of my favorites. Let me ask Magic 8 Ball. Absolutely. Okay, so insurance has gotten to be one of the hottest things that people are juggling right now. Associations, if it's a condominium, would get a blanket insurance policy that would cover for fire, liability on the common areas if somebody was to get hurt. And they would also cover the board of directors with errors and admissions policy. And they would have a fidelity bond that covered the money. Within the last couple of years, we have seen many associations lose their policies or have them raised so much that they can't afford to keep them. And so what happens even in a condominium, they will keep the very bare minimum and say to the owners, if your lender wants you to have other insurance, you're going to have to buy it and cover it. And of course, the individual unit owners are having a difficult time. And this is where it comes in with the lenders right now, because these lenders are trying to write under the Fannie Mae, from under the FHA guidelines, because 70% of all the loans are going to get sold to FHA, and they want to control that market. So when you see that, if you're got somebody that's going into a piece of property with 20% down, and then they have this huge number that they want in earthquake insurance or flood insurance or something like that, it's not going to happen. So you want to be on top of what your borrowers are going to be going to, and then taking a look at the statement of insurance. But that's not even going to tell you until, if you're going in with under 20%, I told you in the beginning that the associations are going to be very well scrutinized, and this is going to be part of it. And a lender cannot determine what coverage the association has to have, their CC&Rs do. And they don't have to accommodate one lender. So the person, if they were to put 20% down, that probably wouldn't have even been an issue. But because their debt to ratio might be good, but they're only putting 10% down or 5% down, that's a red flag to the lender. And they go back to the association and start making requests and demands. I do lender certification forms all the time on the ones that we do the disclosure packages for. And I'm amazed at some of the questions, and almost every one of them are hitting areas that associations, boards of directors would have liability if they answered the question. So it's kind of a catch-22. They're trying to separate, they're trying to get the associations insured the way that they should be. And it's been a very hectic market. I have a project that I currently manage in San Francisco. My insurance went up by $6,000 this year alone. And we had no claims. But because it's a low rise, they felt that there was much more liability. So again, the association does not have to comply with the needs or wants of that lender. So you're going to have to do your homework if you're on the buyer side a little bit more, depending on how much they're putting down. 20%, they don't really scrutinize these as often or as get into the deep dive on what the insurance is, as long as there's fire. There's also, on the other side of it, most of the time, so people would move into these places and say, the association covers my insurance. Yes, for the structure. No, for the interior and your personal items. So an HO6 policy is one that homeowners that are going to live in the property should get on their property, giving the statement of insurance to their insurance carrier and say, cover me around this, so that if there is something that their lender wants, they may be able to pay the premium to get it taken care of. But on the insurance, it's been very, very up and down, and still floundering quite a bit, because it hasn't really settled in as to what the lenders for FHA are going to, what FHA is going to be requiring. But make sure that your owners, your buyers understand that they're going to have insurance. If you've got an investor, they're going to have their insurance, but they're going to want their tenants to have their insurance also. Association will not cover anything on the interior as a general rule.
Are there any questions for Jackie? Usually we have so many questions.
I know, but see, there's enough information out there, and sometimes until you get, oh, there's Yvonne.
Yvonne?
Yep.
I see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. So if you want to type it in chat, I could read it if you're able to do that. Maybe she'll do that.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yep.
There's so many different pieces to this. When I bought my first condominium and I told you it was $12,500, that was to give you a little bit of a rude awakening as to where we are today. But one of the other things that when I bought it is that everything was covered in the insurance. It was an FHA loan, and my CC&Rs were 10 pages long. It had articles of incorporation. The only lender was FHA, and the market has definitely changed quite a bit since then. So, and it's going to change more. There's new laws that the governor loves to sign bills, especially on HOAs. And so there's a couple of organizations that are out there fighting with these guys to not sign some of these, because it puts another burden. Right now, the things that have to happen, I always ask the question when I'm doing a a buyer in a sale that one of you bring to us. And the question is, what do you know about HOAs? And is that something you would be interested in getting involved with? And I don't get very many that say yes, but after a couple of years, quite a few get on. Lindsay has a question.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. So this might be like a really general, broad question. But I was just curious, other than reserve funds, obviously that's like a big red flag if they're not, financially stable. But are there any other red flags in terms of, looking in the HOA docs that we can look out for our clients? Any like big red flags?
Yes, actually, the financial is the biggest one because that's going to keep hitting their pocketbook, okay? And they get in there and they're going along. I had a lady that bought her house in early November last year, and she moved in just before Thanksgiving. And on December the 1st, or I think it was the 30th of November, she got a notice in the mail with the new budget. And the budget, there was a $50,000 special assessment. So you really should be looking at, number one, do they have those balconies? Have they done the inspections? Ask for the report. Or when is that unit going to be fixed? So the balcony issue on condominiums specifically are going to be a big issue, but they're also the same on a PUD, if in fact that they have balconies, because balconies don't just deteriorate in a condominium. They also, the same thing happens in a planned development. So that would be one. The insurance policy would be two, because you're going to have to identify and give them an idea as to, what the costs are going to be and how often they're going to be. And there's no telling if they haven't done that inspection on the balconies. So that's a big red flag, because that, number one, they're going to have to definitely do a special assessment to get those done. And number two, they're going to have to do another special assessment to get them repaired. So that is a big thing. Insurance, whether the insurance looks like it's adequate to meet the needs of that particular association, both fire and liability. But your person can do some insurance on the liability policy also for the interior of their unit. Other red flag, read the minutes. If nothing else, wait till midnight. You can't sleep. Pull out those minutes and read them. If you're like I am, I get the biggest giggle because I got a set of minutes from one of my managers the other day, and his minutes are awful to begin with. And I tell him that all the time. I'm not mentioning any names, but he doesn't put the last name of the board of directors. The minutes are the history of what has gone on in that board meeting and the actions that are being taken by the board. That tells you the history of the HOA. No names, no last names. How would you be able to, 5 years from now, remember what you did? They voted on something, but they didn't state that they did a resolution, things that they might have to do, new regulations, rules and regulations. They have to do a mandate. And also there's things like they borrow money from the reserves to pay for the operating. That's it. Some things that they have to do. So the minutes are always a good thing. Gosh, everything is so important. The balance sheet can only give you current day stuff, doesn't give you history stuff. So you really have to look at that reserve study along with the breakdown as to when items are going to be being done. You might want to look at that. That would certainly be a big piece. If there's a whole bunch of stuff coming up in the next 1 or 2 years and they are underfunded, there's going to be a special assessment or a bank loan that the board can, if there's governing documents allow it, go ahead and charge to you. So that would come up. Anything that's low in the reserves is the biggest thing. Of course, people are always saying, I'm on a fixed income, or I don't worry about that. I have the funds that I'll be able to deal with it. One of my favorite stories is I had a client a few years back, and she was buying a San Francisco property right had a beautiful view of the bay, was the 4-story, beautiful, all windows. She paid, I think it was like $6 million for it. And I called her, she was from New York, and I let her know that there were $88,000 a door deficit in the reserves. And her comment back was, "That's okay, Jackie, I can take you to the restaurant where the ladies' menus don't have the price, and I can write the check." Different thought process than your first-time home buyer that's just getting started in their, work life. And if a special assessment hit them, it would have to shift some of the other stuff that they were doing. So there's two different ends of the spectrum, and of course the middle road. But these are things that you have to really be conscious about. If it's underfunded, it's seriously underfunded. They're under 50% funded in their reserves, and they haven't done some of the stuff that they need to do. That's a big red flag. Move your clients to another transaction, find them something that's a little, I'm hoping to have a scoring system put together so that you can go online, and if I've done a review before, you would have the score. So like a FICO score, if it's within a range, you'd know that it was financially healthy, or at least they had a plan to, prop up that reserve as they needed it. Again, those secret hidden things like bank loans that they're paying off for 10 years, that the seller is getting, the benefit of, and the buyer's taking the liability of. So interesting stuff. Does that answer your question? I think I gave you
Yes,
minutes.
definitely.
minutes
Yeah, I mean,
financial.
obviously HOA documents are a lot to look through, but I was just, trying to get some insight if there are specific things more to pay attention to. So yeah, thank you.
So what happens with what we do is we find the termites in those documents, and then if we're on the buyer side, we have a conversation with you and your clients so they can ask questions. That's a big deal. Agents can't be, you don't get on the roof and tell the roofer that there's a leak. You don't check out the termites. This is even more important than those two things, because it is definitely directed as to whether or not the association has the funds to do it. So big or small, it doesn't make any difference. These associations, it's like getting a home warranty. You don't have any idea what's coming down, but we find things in there that you would not even think about looking for, like articles of incorporation. I had one just the other day. Is the association in good standing with the Secretary of State? This one happened to be suspended, and a homeowner was suing them. Well, when they went to go down to, they had a member was suing, and when they found out that they had no protection anymore because they'd lost their corporate umbrella, each individual homeowner got served with papers on the lawsuit. And the board, their fidelity bond no longer covered them. So you need to know things like that too. It's not just the financial health. There's other administrative and financial situations that you don't want to get yourself into. There's another question.
I got a couple in. I can stay on for about 10 more minutes if you can, Jackie. It's 11:30.
Absolutely.
Okay, and just to make it sure everybody remembers, I am recording this, so we'll get it out. I'm gonna read a couple off of Zoom here from the chat box, and then I see your hand is up, Sky. Let's see. Yvonne's question was, as a listing agent, what can you recommend we do to be proactive?
Order the documents and have them reviewed.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that ultimately your seller is the responsible party. You want the liability on the association rather than your client. We did one not too long ago where half of the documents were missing. And we went back to the manager to get the documents, and they said, "You got everything we have." Well, that's a big red flag. There's no documents. How are they conducting business? And likewise, it was fine because that was disclosed. See, the disclosure is about, you told me and I agreed to it, not that you handed me a set of documents for me to find the issues. You've told them up front. Financial health is a big one. Property insurance is a second one. So you don't want your client who is ultimately responsible, and they can come back to them I think it was up to 3 years, or yeah, I think it was up to 3 years on that contract. And we've had somebody had to buy the property back after 2.5 years because of a big issue with the work that had gotten done. So you want the liability on the association out of your seller's liability realm. And if you're on the buyer side, you want the buyer to know that what they got is everything that they should have gotten, or what was missing. That's the disclosure, and then they can make an agreement that they're okay with that.
We'll do one more Zoom question. We'll do Sky, and then I'll go back to Zoom. I think you did talk about, but it was the per deficit door and the likelihood of that happening.
The deficit per door is, I said 5% are financially healthy. That means 70% or better funded in their reserves. Some of those have a bank loan that's hidden inside of the reserve study. So you need to know all of that stuff. Association, if your buyer is going in there, you don't want to know just the percentage. I love this question because what they should have and what they do have. Remember, the balance sheet is what they have. The budget is, the reserve study is what they're supposed to have. Those two documents put together will give you a number, and that will become a percentage. You want to know the dollar amount, because let me tell you this. I had one that was 35% funded, but it was only $2,800 a door because of the maintenance that they have to do. $2,500 a door is a no-brainer. People will buy that and pay the special assessment when it happens. It's when they're in the 20 and 30 and 40 and $50,000 category, which happens almost daily when we're reviewing documents. So you want to know not only the percentage, but what that dollar amount is to your client. If they know it, they understand it, they can plan for it. It's when they get hit blindsided, and then they don't really bring their family and friends to you to help them buy a place. So that's one of the things you're trying to do.
All right, Sky.
Hello, my
Hi.
question. Hello, my question is, and by the way, thank you for all the information. That's precious. My question is, as a listing agent, as you said, we should order it and review it. And if we send it to you, your company, how long does it take and how much?
We're at 3 working days, and that 3 working days then gives you a list that has to go back to the board of directors or back to the association for them to either say we have it or send it to you. So you're looking at a few extra days on that. But if you're the listing agent, this should be done the minute you take that listing, because I know you're going to do some fixing up before you actually put it on the market. This should be just part of that. And then if there's old documents or whatever, we can also bring those into compliance. We will do the list and sending that list to the association if we're doing it for the seller, not if we're doing it for the buyer, because the seller's the ultimate responsible party. We can usually talk to a management company a little differently about the documents that we're looking for. So 3 working days to get that list. I've had 1 in 2 years that has been fully packaged, and it was because an agent and her person that she uses to set these up knew from using our service so long what was missing, and they went back and got it before they sent it to me. Other than that, I have not had 1 complete package yet this year, for sure.
Yes, often we don't. And one time I asked them to fill out the PRDS request form and they charged me my seller $90 just to fill out that form.
If it was a self-managed project, they would not have been able to charge you, but since it's an association, time is money to them, and that is one of the things that they do. If you don't get the PRDS form, that would be part of our report, giving you that inventory and telling you what was missing, because even that inventory, when you get it, you can get something that says a budget and it can be 2 pages long, when they're normally, the new budget packages are anywhere from 30 to 80 pages long. So just because it has a title on it doesn't mean that it fulfills the obligation for disclosure.
So how much is your service?
We're 575. And if it's on the buyer's side, that includes the half-hour phone conversation. On the seller's side, it takes into consideration us going back and accessing more documents.
Thank you.
Okay, from Zoom, how do HOAs handle the sewer lateral requirements? So I know in some cities that is now a requirement.
Big thing. Sewer lateral has gotten to be a big thing. The sewer lateral, if it's a condominium, from the street to the unit is the association. There generally has been no plan in place, so they have to take money out of their reserves to fix them. And then if they find that they're having a lot of problems with them, they do a special assessment and reimburse the reserves that they borrowed from it, but then they do them. The association is responsible. Anything from the house connection inside of the unit is the owner's responsibility. So sewer laterals on a PUD, you got to look at the property and whether there's easements, but generally in a planned unit development, it's going to cost the seller, whoever it is, because they're responsible for all things of that nature. Association may choose not to have everybody, chopping up the front yards to be able to get to those sewer laterals. So in both instances, they may take responsibility to do the work and special assess to get the work, to pay for the work. But it's a big deal now. I'm saying, I don't see many cities that aren't asking for that.
Okay, any questions right now? Otherwise, like I said, we did record this. I just want to give just one moment. Okay, hi, Pat.
That,
Hi, I just want to say hello to my hero, Jackie,
I, Pat.
and she's kept me and my clients out of hot water so many times because we had a lead on what was wrong and conversely, what's going on, what's going right. So I just mentioned, I will never do a sale without Jackie Berry's review. So I encourage everyone to get on board and get those condo docs ordered ASAP. And I always pay for it, so I make sure it's done. Thank you, Jackie.
Hey, thank you, Pat.
Thanks,
I-
Pat. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. We'll have you again. I don't know how it's August, but we'll probably bring you again the beginning of next year, and we'll just keep these conversations going so everybody's kind of aware what's going on. We'll get the recording out to everybody and contact information for you.
Perfect. You can call me with your individual questions and so if it's a legal question, I'll direct you to
An
good
attorney.
legal, but if I can find it in the Davis Sterling, I'll point you in that and we'll talk about it. Okay?
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much for inviting me.